Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. Link right here in the description. If you click on that, click all the way through it, you'll bypass the Apple upcharge. It'll be just $2.99 per month. Communicate with Heat fans all day and all night long. Get special updates from us, inside information, tell you about our podcast before we do them. You can comment on our podcast after. And we do stage shows that you can't get anywhere else. So check them out. Check it all out at Off the Floor. Again, the link right here in the description. Also, check out one of the sponsors of this episode. It's Underdog Fantasy. Tell you about using the code 5. You can use it in Underdog and get up to $1,000 in bonus play. If you think that Jaime Jaquez is going to pick up his play, you could go over. If you don't, you could go under on him. Again, there's plenty on the Underdog app beyond just that, including the other sports. Lots to play there. So join the more than 5 million happy players over at Underdog. And again, use the code 5 to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Here's the deal, though. You must be at least 18 or 19 in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 in Colorado for some games, and 21 in Massachusetts or Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yeah. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. Make sure that you check out the last couple episodes that we've done here. I went through it with Greg on Terry Rozier and what the Heat do about him at this stage, whether or not you look to move him, you try to make it work off the bench. Greg and I got into all of that. And then Alex and I went through some of the rumors related to Bradley Beal, which, I mean, if you've been following me on Twitter, I've been shooting all that stuff down, but we get into it in more depth. And then an option that hasn't been discussed a lot for the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler this offseason, which is extending him and getting him his money, but at a lower per year. So essentially taking him out 3 years. I think it's something that the Heat would be willing to do. The question is whether Jimmy's camp and Jimmy would be willing to do it, but we get into it in pretty good depth there. Now, today we're going to talk about another player who's been struggling for the Heat pretty much all season, Brady. And I think we had higher hopes for Jaime Jaquez Jr. with the way that he looked in Summer League, when he looked like he'd taken that leap where he's kind of a man amongst boys when he played a couple of games of Summer League. But it has not translated to better play this season. So let me go through some of the stats here as a whole. This year he's averaging 8.8 points, 4.8 rebounds, 2.3 assists. His shooting splits are 42, 25, and then 72 from the line. He hasn't made a three in his last 4 games. He's taken 8 of them, but hasn't made any of them. I'm going to go back to some of his other recent stats here, and then we'll again get into some of the specifics and some of the advanced numbers as well. If you actually go back a little bit further, he made 1 3 against the Lakers, but he's actually now 0 of, he's 1 of 15 in his last 7 games from 3. And it's just been a constant dip in that area. He has shot over 50% from the floor, I guess 1, 2, 3, basically 2 out of the last 7 games. You're just not getting consistent impact. Now, we talked before the season about what he could be, what his role would be on this team. And he actually talked at the end of the season about how he wanted to be a knockdown shooter and a lockdown defender, which is very much role-oriented. We'll start there, Brady. Has he been either of those two things?
Not really. I mean, defensively, has not like been. I mean, last year he was went through a stretch where he was guarding like all the team's best players. That hasn't really happened this year. I don't know. And look, a lot of this we're going to talk about. I'm not sure the reasoning behind it, whether it's injury related, whether it's still recovering from the multiple injuries he's had, or if this is just a dip, because you're seeing a situation where he was shooting 34% on 2.5 attempts last year and catch and shoot threes. It's down to 26%. But the worst part is it's also down to 1.8 attempts. And the things you'll see when you look at a lot of these numbers is not just the efficiency dip, which I think could happen and you could battle through, but it's the attempts dip on everything. The threes, it's the fact about, I mean, the stuff around the rim is pretty similar. The pick and roll ball handler is actually a little up in terms of his points per possession. And I don't know if that's just the fact of he has the ball in his hands in more pick and roll situations, which I don't know if that's his strong suit right now. The big dip to me is that he's not getting as many mid post touches as he did last year. Like that was where he kind of did a lot of his work. And I guess teams have kind of figured that part out where they're just being able to kind of cut off those spins and dips and him trying to find advantages. So it's a weird situation. I mean, it's pretty clear that we thought coming into this season, he was going to have a clear role off the bench, especially without Caleb, that he was going to have the ball in his hands a ton. He was going to be able to operate on the ball. Pelle Larsson stepping in early in the season and kind of taking over that Caleb role, I think kind of took us by surprise. So that kind of pushed him out in a little bit of a way. Terry to the bench, I don't think has helped his touches either. But even before Terry got there, he wasn't really getting the touches. So you're seeing a situation where the players not getting as many on-ball touches. Catch and shoot stuff has gone down from attempts-wise. And he just kind of looks like he's just kind of hit a blockage in a way. Like he doesn't seem as free-flowing as he did in the past. Like even the transition stuff, I know for a while we were talking about him not having a dunk, but like their transition stuff was just such a big part of his profile last year. And it's kind of just went down in general. So it's weird. I really don't know what to attribute it to, because I've seen, people talk about the injury stuff, or if it's just hitting kind of a second-year wall. I don't really know what it is, because the role is there for him. Like he could play the off-ball role with Jimmy and Bam and Tyler and these guys, it feels like at times, or the takeover on the bench unit, but it just hasn't popped at all to begin the year.
The only difference between him and Jovic is that Jaime's still getting the regular reps at this stage. Whereas Jovic, there isn't as natural a fit for him in the rotation. With Jaquez, they need what he's expected to provide, which is give them scoring, give them someone who can kind of come off the bench. We talked a lot last year about he was a plug and play player, right? But that's not what they need from him right now. It's just like the plug and play and kind of be invisible and kind of like Pelle Larsson's done that stuff better than Jaime has this season. What they need from Jaime is they need him to score. I mean, they just need him to score. Like they need him to score off broken plays. They need him to, some of the cutting, offensive rebounding, just creating havoc. It doesn't mean that they're putting the ball in his hands all the time and saying, okay, go get 20, take as many shots as you want. That's not the way that this team is constructed. They've already got an issue with Rozier regarding that. Like, where does he fit in this sort of grand scheme? We've seen Hero and Jimmy kind of, collaborate more of late. And then Bam has gotten lost a little bit. So it's not that they're saying, okay, Jaime, here, we're going to make you a primary scorer. We're going to run everything for you. No, but he has to make his presence known offensively. I think that's the thing. And some of it is put back. Some of it is cuts. Some of it is in transition. He has to kind of be sort of their controlled loose cannon, so to speak, like where you kind of deploy him on the other team and he just has a spurt where he gets you back into a game. We saw that all the time last year. We're not seeing it this year. And I keep going back to a couple things. I know, and you mentioned some of these. I know that everybody wants to talk about the injuries. I don't know how hurt he is. I don't. I know he has not come back from the groin injury last year looking the same. It does seem like he tries to come back maybe a little sooner than some other guys. And I know this has been a big issue for the Heat. They have a couple guys in their roster who like to take a couple games off after the Heat declare them ready to play. Whereas it does seem like Jaime he's back. Like, last year he played 75 games, which led the team. Is some of that residual weariness playing into it now? Like, did he play too much last year? Did he play too quickly after he came back from the injury? But whatever it is, there's the other factor here, which is that we watched this in real time last year, that we were saying, okay, like, what is Jaime's counter to the defense's counter is going to be? It was like very apparent at a certain point last season, they stopped biting on that spin. Like that was like, again, I don't watch the game with the same eye that you do, but I saw it. Okay. Like he'd come down court, he gets sort of to that block and spin into the middle, spin out, spin back into the middle. He had it every time. They started to shut that down. They would bring the other defender over, okay, or the primary defender would read it. There's been no second act here to this. And so it's making me wonder now, okay, what is the counter for him? Because if it's not going to be standing out at the 3-point line, ain't it? Okay, that it's clearly just not where he's most comfortable.
My big thing with Jaime this year, and I think this is one of the hardest things in basketball to adjust to, especially with young players, is something Tyler said a few years ago, but it was about trying to get to the line more and draw more fouls.
Mm-hmm.
And I think young players fall into that trap where they think, that's an easy way to get easy points, jump your points per game, slow the game down. But it's such a hard thing to do, especially when you're trying to get the respect of the referees at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler did it last year, at the beginning of last year, and it didn't work. He just kept trying to draw fouls, and it dropped his finishing, and you saw him go away from it. This year, you've seen what Tyler's done. Why does he have such a big finishing jump this year? It's because he's playing for the finish. He's not playing for the foul. He's not trying to draw. The contact he draws, he's trying to finish off that. He's not trying to draw the foul. And you're seeing the fouls come with that because now he's becoming a real attacker, and that comes. I say all of that because I really do think that's one of the biggest parts of Jaime's game this year that's caught my eye. I just feel like it's the free-flowing thing, but it's the fact of he's almost just pinballing his way to the rim at a lot of times like Jimmy does because he's taken so much from Jimmy. But he's not going to get the foul calls that Jimmy gets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dropping the finishing because now he's just off balance. He's taking contact. He just kind of has to throw the ball up in the air, and the finishing is dropped. I think it was 57% less than 10 feet from the basket last year. It's down to 49.5, so it's under 50%. It's a pretty big, drop. I mean, it's pretty clear. Number one, he's just not getting the same easy opportunities less than 10 feet from the basket. As you mentioned, there was the baseline cutting. There was just the easy ones he would get off the ball. There was the transition stuff. So he had a lot of easy stuff. The easy stuff's not coming this year. So he's having to create more. And off those creations, I really do think he's playing for the foul in a lot of these situations or just taking contact. As we've talked about, I thought the big jump for him this year was going to be he was going to make things easier on himself with like mismatch hunting. I always talk about the fact that he's never looking for a mismatch. He's just going to go at whoever's in front of him. And maybe that's a blessing and a curse. I mean, I think that's a good thing to have that mindset, that killer mindset that you could go at anybody. But at some point, you're going to have to try to find easier advantages for yourself, just like Jimmy does. That's kind of one of the best parts of his game is that he reads the game in that way. So I don't know how much that's playing a part in it, but I do think he needs to see the ball go in a few times. Mm-hmm. He needs to have an efficient night where he's getting to the rim and finishing, and then maybe everything can kind of come off from there. But he hasn't had that night. He hasn't had that night where things were coming easy like last year in his rookie season where he was just kind of putting pivot moves in the post, finishing with ease. Mid-range, I think, is another thing we could probably talk about because we talk about how them taking mid-range shots from everybody has kind of impacted everybody's game. I mean, Jaime, it's not like Jaime was taking a ton of mid-range jumpers, but that's where he started most of his possessions. Like he was starting there and operating from there, and he had the opportunity to like go into a spin and fade if he wanted to, and that's been cut out of his game too. So I don't know how much that's impacted him, but I really do believe teams are saying, okay, we're not worried about this guy's three-point shooting. We can help off. The mid-range is something that he's not going to. So it's literally just somebody going to the rim and trying to draw a foul. So we could play this and just put our hands up in the air, not foul, and see what he can do. So it's an interesting conversation because I do think he has the ability to break out of this slump. Like I do think there's clear ways he can. Like this is one of these situations where it's like, okay, he needs to be out of the rotation completely because he's been figured out. But I do think there is some adjustments to be made. And I guess it is natural for a second-year player.
Well, we're 20 games in. I think it's an appropriate time to declare it a slump. So that's the first thing. Like we kind of waited on this. I want to go through some of the specific numbers here just to see if there's any trends. So he's played 3 because the whole thing about it, whether he's healthy or not, right, and the rest and all that. So he's played 3 games on no days rest. So basically back-to-backs. He shot 32% in those games. One of those games he was a starter. He's only started one game, and that game he actually didn't shoot particularly. He shot 5 of 14, but he did get to the line 12 times, and he had 10 rebounds, and he had 19 points. So he had an opportunity kind of to get comfortable there. But I want to go through some of the shooting stats for him and what we're looking at is compared to last year. Because you mentioned some of the drop off here. I mean, I'm looking at his shot chart, and there is nothing between the paint and the 3-point line. Nothing. Like you can't. There's no X's and there's no O's. So for people who are not familiar with shot charts, like it goes in. It's a green colored in circle, and it doesn't. It's a red X, and I'm seeing all these X's and green all near the paint, all inside near the basket, which is what the Heat wanted. And then a lot of stuff out of the 3-point line, which is a lot of red X's. There are a lot of red X's. This is like Family Feud. This is not what you want. Okay. This is over and over and over here. And I'm looking at the shot distance according to, which again, this is reflected in the shot chart. I mean, right now he's 10 of 40 from 3. He's taken 48 shots at the rim. He's taken 40 shots at 3. He's taken 63 shots from 3 to 10 feet. He's taken nothing from 10 feet to the 3-point line. So he's 1 of 6, which is, basically what the shot chart reflects. I know, again, that the Heat are de-emphasizing that shot, but it would be nice if he developed a little of it, right? Like, I mean, because if he's going to be, if he's not comfortable with the 3-point line right now, and he doesn't have confidence in the 3-point line, and teams are playing off of him, then taking a dribble in and taking an occasional shot in rhythm wouldn't be the worst thing. It does not seem like A, they've encouraged that, and B, that it's part of his arsenal. And then I'm looking at even his layups this year. He's at 50% on layups. I think that is a lot, sort of foul hunting that he's been doing. And the other thing I've noticed is he seems to play better early in games. When he gets that, his overall stats early in games on that first stint is better than his second one. So it's not like he's feeling the game and kind of working his way into it. Actually, the opposite is happening. Would you? I mean, again, this 3 layups, dunks, or they don't get a lot of dunks. He's got 2 dunks, layups, dunks, or threes philosophy. Do they need to bend a little bit with him on this? Does he need to develop that part of his game?
I kind of think so. I mean, that's kind of what I was hinting at before. It's like there's certain players. I kept saying this at the beginning of the year when I was talking about Bam, where I was like, this rule was put in place for Tyler and Terry. And Tyler's taken it in stride, and he's benefited from it. Terry probably not as much. But I was like, Bam still needs those shots. This isn't a Bam rule. Bam needs to be him. He needs to take those mid ranges, and that probably appeals to Jaime, where it's like if you have a guy on your back and they're cutting off your spin, they're cutting off your ability to create and get an angle at the rim. You could work that post fade. You could work that little stop jumper, close push shot, and he just hasn't gotten to that as you mentioned. His 2 mentors are DeMar DeRozan and Jimmy Butler. So like this idea of like what he should be doing in his offense and in the half court, it's like he's benefited his whole career, his whole young career, his whole life in the mid-range because he's watched 2 mid-range artists go to work. So I definitely agree. I think he could definitely find ways to lean into it. But that also comes with like, this isn't just an efficiency thing. And that's kind of what I was getting at the start. It's like, it's also an attempts dip. So I don't know if it's a confidence thing, if it's they're leaning in a different direction this year. And I've kind of mentioned that past years, Miami's leaned more on their role players than maybe their top end guys. And it feels like this year, one of the big changes more than anything has been they're leaning into their top guys. They're leaning into Tyler, leaning into Jimmy. I think we want them to lean more into Bam. But so it's like they're kind of losing attempts for guys like Jaquez. But I do think at a certain point, especially when you have a bench unit that's really struggling, like you have nobody able to pop in this last game in Detroit, you have to find different ways to get different guys the ball. And Jaime getting him the ball in his spots, I think, is important. I mean, him, as you mentioned, him standing out the 3-point line, I don't think is doing him justice. Him running constant pick and rolls, I don't think is doing him justice. We talked about it in the Boston series last year, and I liked it. I thought it was good reps for him. Like he needed to kind of surround his entire game and polish it up and get pick and roll reps. But that's not him completely. Like he's not just a strict pick and roll player. Especially if he's not getting the foul calls or if he doesn't have like a mid-range pull-up to get to. So he has to find different ways to be effective, and it feels like isolation stuff with his back to the basket is the best way. So that ties into the mid-range shot. I don't really know if there is a clear opportunity. I mean, if Terry's not taking a bunch of shots and he's not aggressive in that second unit lineup, and he's playing a lot off the ball anyway, there's no reason not to go to Jaime in those spots, just to try to get him in a rhythm. And there's certain matchups you look at. We talked about it before. Like there's certain games you'll go into, you're like, okay, this is a game where Jaime can get going. It's the same games where Jimmy gets going. Like they read the defenses the same way. So there's clear opportunity there. It just feels like when they go into a game and say, okay, we're going to go to Jimmy here in these spots, you almost have to say that for Jaime in the second unit because you can kind of mirror it.
So I'm looking at his double-digit attempt games. He just had one against Detroit. It didn't go particularly well. He had 3 double-digit attempt games in the first 5 games of the season, and he's had 3 since. So it does indicate that they've gotten away from him as the season has gone on. And I want to get into on the other side of this what this means for this team going forward, because we were expecting a pop here, and it's clearly you're 20 games in. This is sophomore slump. There's no. I mean, we can talk about what the reason for it is. Again, is it on him? Is it on the Heat's philosophy? Is it on injuries? Is it on scouting? Whatever it is, but this is not enough. From in terms of the way that we began to speak of him and the way that the Heat began to value him. And I do think that it impacts things if he doesn't snap out of it. I'm with you that I think he can, but there's got to be another layer to his game here that we have not seen so far this season. All right. I want to talk about a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, a chance to win some money. Go to BettorEdge.com. Use the code 5RSN. You put that code in, that's the number 5RSN, you get $20 to play. This is the premier sports betting marketplace. The difference between this and the other one that you hear about down here, there's no VIG. So you're not giving away money to the house for free, and you can find the line that you want in their marketplace. You also can enter our contest. I put them up on the 5 Reasons Sports Twitter account. Do a weekly NFL contest, $5 entry, winner take all. So check it out, BettorEdge.com. Use the code 5RSN, and actually, with the contest this week, if you win, I'm going to give you a free sub for a year to Off the Floor. So we'll throw that in as well. Again, that's a $36 value. So check it out, BettorEdge.com. Use the code 5RSN. Against the number 5RSN, get $20 to play right away. All right, so getting back to Jaquez's situation here. Everything we talk about now going forward until the trade deadline is going to be about more than just basketball on the floor and how it helps the Heat, but, asset management, essentially, because we know that the Heat, have to find a way out of this kind of slightly better than mediocrity position. Okay. And we talked about Rozier's value, and clearly has tanked. I mean, there's no way you're getting a first-round pick for Terry Rozier, a first-round pick in a significant expiring contract, which is what the Heat had to give up to get Rozier. Do you think the teams will look at Jaquez's step back this year, even if it's not a permanent thing, and start to say, okay, some of the stuff that was said about him coming into the draft was true. The upside was limited. He was a mostly formed player at that time. That's why he contributed right away to the Heat, but it's also why we're not seeing the next step this year. Would that concern you?
I think teams, I'll just say, in terms of like trade sense, I think teams are looking at any of Miami's assets and saying, like, taking a step back, looking at it. And I think it's different when it's a first round pick. But like with the undrafted situation of when guys leave, I think they're always going to think twice about these players in Miami. It is funny. I mean, I think the way that it was made in the draft about his age, and I guess like him being like a lower upside guy, a higher floor guy, and you're kind of seeing his floor take a little bit of a dip this season, I think would make teams wonder. I've kind of been the person that's kind of pushed back on that a little bit, where I think the upside's probably a little higher than we give credit, but the floor could probably fluctuate as we're seeing this season. But it's hard to tell. I mean, I don't think Miami's in a situation either with talking trades. Like, I don't think they're selling on this young piece, like, at any point. Like, I still think they're in a position where they're going to ride this out. Pelle Larsson, I think, to your point, makes this a little bit easier. I mean, if there was something like, I'm not talking untouchable here. I mean, if there's like some trades to be made and there's a big acquisition here, of course, like anybody's up for grabs. But the Pelle Larsson thing, I think, makes things a little bit different, because it was always about opening up his game and finding like a clear role for him. And it just feels like, to me, every time you turn around, like they're finding a new guy at the wing position that plays this style. Like, they really like this type of player, and they're able to kind of keep finding these guys. It almost feels like the guards and the wings are their specialty, and then we keep talking about these bigs that keep coming in and never playing. But yeah, it is a weird situation. I don't know how I see other teams seeing it, because I really do believe, I just think teams think twice about it when they see guys from Miami on the trade market, especially when they have a certain dip. And I think when you see a situation like Terry, what's going on, I think they're really going to start thinking twice about what's going to happen when you take a guy that put up big numbers in the past. It's a little bit different because obviously he was on a good team. But you could eventually see a dip when you go to another, try to work yourself into another group.
Well, I think Larson's emergence prior to the injury does change the equation somewhat. And because I'm not saying the two of them can't play together. I think they can, actually. We saw Spoelstra experimenting with this a little bit. But if you have a guy in the pipeline who can do some of the things that Jaime did, and Larson's emergence has been different. Jaime kind of exploded on the scene, right? Like it didn't seem like teams knew how to handle him. Larson's been this kind of gradual, again, until the injury, and he's been some gradual, like, okay, there's a little bit more of this there. There's a little bit more of this there. It hasn't, again, part of it has been because he's got more players in front of him than Jaime had last year. Although Jaime had Caleb in front of him, and Jaime found a role. And one of the reasons why, and I know they tried to retain Caleb at a very high price, but one of the reasons we were comfortable saying, okay, Caleb's agent made a huge mistake here, and Caleb's walking, they'll be okay because Jaquez is going to, eat up those extra minutes, and you may get even more productivity. The reality is you haven't. You've gotten kind of the productivity that you got from Caleb early last season when Caleb was hurt, not playing particularly well. So it hasn't been, again, the pop that we were expecting. At least he's playing, which is not something that's happening with Jovic. But actually, I think Niko, when he has played better than Jaime. Is that fair?
100%. I just think the role is so much different. I mean, it's just because they look at Niko and they're running these 9-man rotations and they have their 3 spots lined up, and then they're like, okay, we can't. Do we play him a backup 5? I don't think we do that. And then it's like, okay, now he's the 10th guy, and then now he doesn't play or he gets thrown in for spurt minutes. But like when he has played, I mean, he has played impact minutes. Like his spurts have been a lot stronger, it feels like, than Jaime's short stints. I don't know. It really does feel like a position thing, right? I mean, this always comes back to that. I think they just feel more comfortable with these type of wings to kind of battle it through because they can move them around the chest, like at the chessboard a little bit. Whereas Jovic is kind of lined into a specific role. And I think a lot of people would say, why is he lined into a specific role? Because it does feel like, we've talked about point Niko, or we've talked about different things, but I do think defensively is probably the key there, is probably because I think they always evaluate their rotations and everything, starting with the defense and their positions with the defense. And Jaime, they feel like even if he's not a ball stopper, like you talked about in the offseason, he's still a switchable player that can guard 1 through 4, that could body up against kind of different guys. Whereas Niko, they have to kind of move things around a different way. But I agree. I think Jovic has had, it's tough for him. I mean, for him to play well in those short moments and not be able to get full out opportunity. And hey, maybe he would have. I mean, this past injury where he just sprained his ankle in practice, this felt like the opportunity, if there was going to be one, where he would have played in Detroit. And that's a good matchup for him too.
Yeah, and he might have taken some of these minutes that Jaquez took. It's tough. They've got to find potential roles for Jovic, for Jaquez, not just for what they can do for this team, but if they are going to end up moving any of these guys to get somebody else, they got to play somewhere. And that's why we're like, okay, playing Jay Rich over Larson doesn't make a lot of sense because, I mean, where is that going? Like, you get Pella the minutes. And a lot of people were like, wow, playing Bryant over Ware doesn't make sense. Although I get that one at the time because, again, that's more for Ware's development than it is for anything else, is to kind of make him earn it. But Jovic, kind of did earn it last year, became a starter. Now, some of their lineups this year with Jovic were pretty awful, including the starting lineup. So there is some lineup data there that's not great. But the lineup data with Jaime is not great either. I mean, their lineups get better with Haywood in them. They get better with Duncan in them. They haven't gotten better with Jaquez in them this year. And I think if you were to say, okay, who do you want them to get better with him in them? It's him, because he's somebody you invested a first-round pick in. So I haven't given up on him. I just think that now I guess we see when we talk about, okay, this guy could fill the Jimmy Butler role, it ain't that easy to fill the Jimmy Butler role. And that's everything comes back to that. I think you might feel more comfortable kind of playing hardball with Jimmy here going forward if you had Jaime Jaquez looking great in his minutes. He doesn't. So it makes you think twice here a little bit. Again, not that Jaime was going to be Jimmy right away, but I've made the analogy that Jimmy was the 30th pick in the draft. I mean, he was not projected to become what he's become. Jaime was picked a little higher. Looked really good as a rookie. Played more than Jimmy did as a rookie, by the way. I was a little older than Jimmy was at that time, but there's a reason Jimmy Butler is one of them ones, as they say. All right, Brady, we appreciate it. Check out sponsors. You see, when I said that, you got a little smirk there. Follow me at Brady Hawk 305. BettorEdge, use the code 5RSN. Underdog, use the code 5FIVE. Have a good one.